because of these three factors all happening at once, it creates a force that I have never seen in my career in any other field. Everyone in quantum computing is motivated by seeing this technology through because we are the underdogs, as you would call it. We are the people, even still, where everyone doubts that it's possible. I sort of instantly recognized the danger, and I don't consider myself a pessimist. If I were a pessimist, then this would be the wrong business for me. We first have to educate the world about what quantum computing in particular can bring. We are entering an entire new era that I don't think most people appreciate the speed at which things are happening.
Welcome to another episode of the Quantum Economy Podcast. Today, my guest is Nick Farina, co-founder and CEO of EeroQ, a Chicago-based quantum computing company taking on an unconventional path towards building a scalable quantum system. For Nick, breakthroughs in quantum is not one big shot. It's a chain of advances feeding each other, gathering speed, and carrying a field into a new technological era. But each wave of progress demands reflection, awareness, ethics, and the willingness to thoughtfully innovate in a realm that can and most likely will reshape our world. This is the Quantum Economy Podcast with Nick Farina.
Yeah, so this is a conversation in a series where we are looking at various approaches that are not mainstream when it comes to building a quantum computing, and I'm very glad to have Nick on. He's been in the industry for a long time, and I think this conversation is going to take us to, I would say, electrons floating on helium, all the way to ideas floating at the intersection of ethics and philosophy. So I think it's going to be a fun talk, and thank you so much for coming on, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me, Anders. It's really a pleasure. I've watched all of the episodes, I can say, proudly now. And I won't name any favorites because some of them are my friends and I don't want to offend anyone. But really mind expanding. And I love the multidisciplinary flavor. So keep very excited to be here. And thank you again for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about EeroQ, and we're going to talk about like what you're building, and that's to many a bit unusual. But before we get there, I'm a born. Was that? Yes, of course. Yes, I imagine. But before we get to that, I'm a born Viking. I'm a 98% Scandinavian, tested on myheritage.com, and so I grew up with snow and winter in a mining town in Verus. And you started to talk about snowballs and rolling down the hill, colliding together and creating some kind of quantum breakthrough. And I was very curious. First of all, what are these snowballs?
So this is a trick that I used originally when I was at a party or something and people weren't very interested in quantum computing, or if I was trying to explain it in even remotely technical terms, they didn't quite understand it. And that's not their fault. This is an incredibly complex area, and I did not come to it with a PhD myself. So I started thinking about how can I explain why I believe we're not at the point where everyone says, oh, it's always going to be 5 years away, and then another 5 years, and then another 5 years. People want tangible proof points about why this time is different. And the answer I give is that there are 3 snowballs, and they're all rolling downhill at varying speeds, but let's pretend there's one little crater at the bottom, and they're all going straight down. And if we can build a big enough crater, that is a fault-tolerant quantum computer. And so then, of course, the question becomes, what are the 3 snowballs? And what's happening is advances in number 1 is, of course, building better chips. And that doesn't just mean how many qubits do you have, but it also means what is your true ability to scale to hundreds of thousands and eventually millions of qubits. And then number 2 is error correction. And we have had remarkable advances in error correction. Just it used to be maybe every 1 year someone would come out with an improvement, if not a breakthrough. And now we see several, what many even seasoned professors would agree are breakthroughs in error correction. And this year we've seen a number, including entirely new forms like quantum LDPC codes. And then the third part of it, and the third snowball, are more efficient algorithms. Because right now, when we make assumptions that it's going to take X number of physical qubits with whatever ratio you prefer, and I don't, when people ask us what's our physical to logical qubit ratio, I always push back and I say there's no way to know that, because we're going to have better error correction in 2 to 3 years. So whatever numbers we had now, if we had a fully working quantum computer, which we and most of the field does not yet, we wouldn't know, we wouldn't be able to pinpoint what will be in 3 years. So because of these 3 factors all happening at once, it creates a force that I have never seen in my career in any other field. And the interest is only growing, both from countries, sovereign governments, as well as from industry, the private sector. And you can see innovation coming from both ends of this. And different people are motivated by different things. But I think everyone in quantum computing is motivated by seeing this technology through, because we are the underdogs, as you would call it. We are the people, even still, where everyone doubts that it's possible.
Right.
And I do believe that if it were only, the last thing I'll say is, if it were only one snowball, then I think we would be in trouble. If we were just waiting on bigger chips, or just waiting on more efficient algorithms. And as an algorithm, a stunning example, people are talking about Google's latest result, but I actually think Google's most impressive result this year was when Craig Gidney, one of their best people there, who put out a paper saying he had theorized a way, and when he says he writes something, I take it seriously, that we could break RSA 2048. And I know you've covered on encryption and the scary factor there with Rebecca and others. And he's proposed we can do it now with only 1 million noisy physical qubits. And this just shows the incredible trajectory that we're on. So I think in 3 years, I don't want to be the guy who's made a prediction specifically, but I think in general, with all of these 3 forces coming and working together, I think we're going to get to quantum advantage earlier than expected, which will have good and likely some bad consequences.
No, because you say this regardless of the approaches to building a quantum computer, you're agnostic on the structures, and you think there's an industry that is forming, and the snowballs comes out of this industry. But do you think it's just about technology, or is there a collision of markets and mindsets as well?
That's a great question, and I don't say that's a great question to everything. I actually mean that is. And I believe it is both, because the markets are certainly waking up to quantum computing. I'm not sure how long it will last at some current pricing, but I'm not a stock trader. I'm a quantum computing founder, so I don't stick my nose in pricing. But what I certainly can tell is that there is a demand now for quantum computing that absolutely did not exist 5 years ago. And this is from both directors and investors, and directors of large companies who are approaching us now. And we have a simulator, but asking us to use our simulator. And this would have never happened even 2 years ago. So there is a market out there that is waking up to the reality of both the need for post-quantum security, whatever form that may end up taking. I'm not an expert there, so I rely on the expertise of others. But within shipbuilding, I think we're in for some major surprises. We certainly have some that will be surprising. That doesn't mean it's going to be the end-all be-all. I'm not convinced there's just one quantum computer. But yes, to answer your question, I think it's the technology. The markets have laid the groundwork for the investment in the technology. And without the appetite, I believe, and interest of the markets, I don't think we would have the amount of funding and brain power needed to move as quickly as we need to over the next, let's call it 3 to 4 years.
No, but I think it is obvious to see that money drives minds into the industry, and you have a lot of bright minds coming out of academia, joining various labs and corporates because they could do the same thing just with a lot more money and a lot restrictions, which again, speeds up progress. And I think this is also something that you have been very, very outspoken on, and that is just the mindful building of this technology. When I listen to you, you're bullish on the snowballs, you are excited about progress, but what happens when everyone, not just the experts, but everyone joins in on that conversations, and money fuel into an industry is an expectations of return on investor. The pressure also on even more rapid, even more scalable progress becomes even higher. And I think this is one of your core topics, also looking into the responsible building of this technology. And I think this is a very challenging dance because you have the markets, you have the scale capital, you have the passion for progress, but at the same time, you are an advocate of a responsible quantum computing.
Yes. And it would seem initially, I have some friends who believe that we should not be building quantum computers at all, because they think that there's no evidence that we have in the history of technology that humans are responsible enough to handle the power that quantum computing is going to bring to the world. I do not fall into that camp.
But let me just pause here for just 1 second, because I'm just curious about this, how that came to be, because you wrote a paper on this long before the buzzword on responsibility came up back in 2017. The physicists were then back then thinking about the first initial progress. There wasn't an industry, there wasn't a quantum economy. No. What led you back in 2017 to publish on that topic?
I sort of instantly recognized the danger, and I don't consider myself a pessimist. If I were a pessimist, then this would be the wrong business for me, and I would need to immediately leave this business and go find something else to do, because it's you have to have optimism for the world, and optimism that the technology can be used responsibly. And the one thing that's changed since the original days of the 2017 writings, and then we had a big convening ready at Columbia University, and COVID happened, and it's a shameful thing for me that we have not picked back up, because it's certainly, that was a long time ago, and we cannot use that as an excuse to why we're not doing multidisciplinary convenings. But I think this goes a little bit back to, and I would say, and I'm going to have to quickly I want to get my exact number right. The population of the world, which is 8.2 billion people, it looks like. So I would say that what we need is 8 billion people, 8.2 billion people, that are in quantum, as opposed to 2 billion or so, because Worley, who again is a good friend, we share the exact same belief that quantum computing has to be democratized, but and this will get to your question, I promise. And if it doesn't, you can press me back on it. Is that if the world is not aware of what quantum computing is doing, and I really only focus on quantum computing, I know what I know and I know what I don't know. So quantum sensing is wonderful, and quantum networking is wonderful, but these are areas in which I'm not as much of an expert, even though I've made some investments in those areas. But I believe that we first have to educate the world about what quantum computing in particular can bring, because then we're going to have more people will be able, even if in the event that we are not able to control quantum computing and the pessimists turn out to be right, we will do much better if we have billions of people who are aware of the technology and can push back on irresponsible use. And then the one other thing I'll add is we moved it from ethics to now. So we are looking at calling it the Institute for Responsible Quantum Computing. And I know this phrase has come up a few other times recently, because when we talk about ethics, I was a history major who almost was a philosophy major. So to me, talking about the ethics of quantum computing is deeply interesting. But ultimately, I wanted to make an impact, just as I did with this business. And when you say ethics, people seem to think it's perhaps, oh, is that overly philosophical? Is that just going to end up being a bunch of white papers that are going back and forth and no one is going to actually enforce them? And I'm not arguing for any one particular place to enforce them, but rather to have multidisciplinary dialogues. And this was led a lot by our co-founder, Faye Waddleton, who was an activist before she joined a large corporation and then joined EeroQ. So Faye and I have had this vision of a multidisciplinary dialogue that educates as many people as possible, plus us having I don't want to declare winners, but us having a place at the table as a leading quantum computing company. I think with those two put together, we might have a chance at allowing for creating a framework for responsible quantum computing, because it has been done before in other fields, and I don't see any reason why we can't do it here.
There are some of the things to play with and unpack here with what you just said, and you could always look at what role does the technology itself, the quantum power, play, and what is the actual part of the human agency. But one thing that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on: what does responsibility even mean in a field where there is no mass impact right now at the moment? Because you talked a lot about the understanding and getting it out to the people. So is it more anticipation, or is it accountability? I think this is like a challenge to play with the word to be responsible when there is no mass impact.
I think that's the perfect time. And I think one lesson that we learned from AI is that right now there are many brilliant people who are working on safety and responsibility for artificial intelligence, and in various forms, whatever those forms may be. And that's great. But what happened was, if you look through most of it, other than a few sort of some fringe early work, now granted, the history of artificial intelligence, as you know, being focused on this as well in your work, is a much longer history than that of quantum computing. But I think that gives us an opportunity. And I think the opportunity that quantum computing is new is what allows us to get to people early, and alert them of what impact they may have on their lives. So just as a quick example, I spoke to a group of lawyers at a conference in Washington, D.C., that was sponsored by the American Bar Association. And it was about how quantum computing will impact your practice. And there were so many ways. I mean, a lot of it focused around a law firm has a duty to protect its clients' files. So a lot of it focused on security, but then some of it also fell on, what are some ways that in the future, quantum computing may help to work in hand with AI to more fully automate work at my law firm. And so here you had 50 lawyers who had no idea what quantum computing was coming in the door. And then we educate them and they walk out filled with understanding and ideas. And yes, maybe some of them are a little bit afraid, but if our snowballs come to pass and we do have a 3 to even, let's call it 5-year window, that's very fast to migrate to new security. And I think that could be one of the challenges, is figuring out new securities, new security forms. And there are so many people trying different things. It's hard to know what will be the standard. But to double down on that, I would just say, I think the answer, and we had an article about this, called "The Time Is Now." I believe that was the title of the article, was that the time is now to start thinking about the moral impacts and the ethical and responsibility impacts of quantum computing. Because if we think about them ahead of time, then we can prevent harm from happening afterwards and thinking too late.
No, I get this from a point of an expert and being deep in the weeds on technology, but is there a moral difference then between being unethical and being unaware?
I believe there is a difference, yes. And so what my goal would be then is to have as many people become aware.
So you would say that awareness itself is then an ethical act?
Aware, it depends on how you use it. So if someone is an expert in quantum computing and chooses to perform a clearly unethical act, and there are the fringe cases where we can debate if it's ethical or unethical, but if someone performs a clearly unethical act and using a quantum computer, such as breaking encryption, 2048 to start with, then if that person is knowledgeable about quantum computing, and maybe this isn't the best example because we have to assume they are, then their knowledge is unethical. They have the knowledge of what they should be doing. They should be using this to use their brain power to create new pharmaceuticals, even to work on security for banks. They should not be doing it to do things that are illegal. But if there were someone who simply did not know what they were getting into. And, let's say they, by mistake in playing around, because something that does scare me is it's not clear what we can do with quantum computers at any given level yet. And there is a possibility that it's not some genius from Google who discovers how to break RSA 2048. It's someone who has access to an unexpectedly powerful quantum computer living at their home. And that person would therefore be unethical.
Right. But don't you think that, that is to me also an ethical act if you have a deeper understanding. But isn't the challenge, the same applies for AI, isn't the challenge though that the complexity and also the drivers of innovation, we're talking about the capital markets, that to take the precautionary principles, you also need to have the right people having that particular understanding. And that to me seems to be a mismatch. So, if I would ask you, like, would you slow down innovation intentionally to reflect on ethical, principles, knowingly so that you will lose battle, you will lose ground against competitors? That could be a conscious state of taking a responsible path towards. But isn't the challenge, though, that most of these battles fought on progress are amongst a lot of players that wouldn't see necessarily the potential negative outcome? I think for AI and quantum, the more complexity, the higher the stakes, the more the winner takes all market, the more money to the markets. We are racing towards an unpredictable future. So I think the whole essence of taking these precautionary principles or defining an ethics becomes very, very complex. That's why I asked the question on anticipation and understanding, because it seems like that's the big challenge.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that we also have to come up with ways to make it easier for people to understand quantum. I was talking a week ago to someone, and we were discussing how I almost wish that I could rebrand quantum computing as something else in my first conversation with someone. And by all my talking about meeting people, you might assume I go to parties all the time. That's not the case. I mostly
have a proposal for that rebranding also.
Yeah. No, but he said start with what it does. We are building a supercomputer that will outpace all other types of supercomputers based on some really interesting mechanisms of physics. And that's still a little intense, but that describes what we do in a way, because people say, oh, I didn't take physics in, high school, I'm doomed. So I think the more that we can do to educate people in an easier fashion brings that barrier down. And I believe Worley spoke about that a little bit as well. Hey, quantum computing for babies, how much earlier can you get? But I think bringing the barrier to entry down, and I think people in the industry are doing a good job in putting out content, both shows like yours, as well as even some like IBM. I have a friend there, Olivia Lanes, and she does Dr. Lanes does incredible work around just educating people on quantum computing. So I think this education part is critical, because we have to find a way that we were not able to find to easily educate people on quantum computing and its capabilities and its potential timelines. And I am not the right person to come up with that curriculum, but we're considering in our business actually not having a branch of that per se, but having that be part of more of our core business, and baked into more of the core of what we do every day.
Yeah, you spoke about Wireless Initiative, A Billion Minds, and how you align with that. And you talked about, bringing quantum to 8.2 billion people. Yet at the same time, you warn in your paper about, only governments and large corporations having the quantum powers. And if we look at the markets today, there is publications, the US government around the world, how governments also take equity in the larger players. We kind of sort of seem to be moving in the opposite direction, though. And also, if you look at the impact on the financial side, it seems to be bigger corporations that hold more power. If there is a breakthrough, you'll buy it. Whatever genius it's and comes up with some small startup, there is almost always a potential to acquire this company. So the argument also, and I like Worley, and I like the approach, what you guys also are doing, and I think it's a very, very good way to look at it. But where are we? Are prepared for the world that is coming? Or maybe let me rephrase the question to how can we make ethics become a form of strategic advantage?
That is, if I had the answer to that question, then I would immediately implement it into my Institute for Responsible Quantum Computing initiative. I would immediately integrate it into that, because that's the question that's the question. And if we had the answer to that question, I believe that we would already have solved many of the problems that we still face today. So this is not to say that I'm giving up on the problem, or that I see any, reason for us at this point to abandon it and say it's too hard. Because I think to some extent that's what happened in AI. If we want to be a little controversial, is people said, where AI is true artificial intelligence and machine learning and neural nets, and these are complex things. And if we want people to understand artificial intelligence, they have to understand neural nets. And I just don't believe that's true. I think that as long as the company is being honest, and ideally you have enough and honest companies that would counter dishonest companies. But I believe that if you have honest companies that are talking about ethics and responsibility, and the steps that they are taking, because they might have better ideas than I have, then we can really break it down to a much simpler level, so that people can understand a quantum computer is not likely to be showing up inside your cell phone, but it is potentially going, God forbid you get cancer or something. It may come up with a medicine that will let you live longer. And it's not just people always default to cancer, but there are millions of diseases in the world, that many of which are unknown, that we could see not only quantum computers being able to develop new medicines for that weren't able to be simulated on supercomputers, but also get drugs to market faster by getting FDA and other countries' approvals faster. And this is good for the world, and it's good for the pharmaceutical companies. So I think it's balancing things like that, balancing these clearly positive use cases with balancing negative use cases. And the question that I, again, struggle with is, at what point does the government take control? Because I do still believe, as in that paper, that at a certain point of power that quantum computers will have, we may well see the government say, hey, that's really nice quantum computer that you have. We would like to to buy it from you, or to only allow it to be sold to certain subcontractors, or something like this. And if this were to happen, I mean, this has happened before. We just have to have the global nature of it is what makes it so difficult, is what I'll conclude with, is that I think if it were one country, it would be much easier to control. But if you think about the negative impacts of quantum computing, and again, I feel like I focus too much on them, but if you look at the negative impacts on quantum computing, it's very difficult to trace back where these attacks have come from. Whereas if someone launches a nuclear weapon, it is relatively easy to trace back where that came from and retaliate. So, yeah, I think it creates a tremendous challenge, and a grand challenge, I would say, to solve of this century. And I think we need a lot of minds thinking about it and talking about it. And just in that talking about it, just in us talking about it, maybe you come up with the answer in our conversation. Who knows? But the more conversations, the better.
All right. And then I think the strategic advantage is maybe a far-fetched for an ethical structure, but you ended off in your paper with an Aristotelian way of saying ethics as a habit. And, when you talk to founders and scientists today, like others, like small 1, 2, 3 small tangible things that you'd use or takeaways that you could get practical on starting to apply, to learn a virtue as a company, to have it a part of a culture, or like kind of sort of implement it the way systems learn with data.
Yeah. So 1 or 3 tips, exact, basically 1 or 3.
Yeah, just other tangible things to say that, like, how can you apply it to a company to learn the virtue? Yeah.
I think number 1 is to engage with the outside world. And this can be really hard at very, very early stage startups. And again, we fall in the middle where, we have a staff, we have, extra people on hand if we need to do a last minute event or something. But when you're extremely small, like 1 or 2 people hacking away, I would say don't worry about it yet. What's the right number to start thinking about it? I would say probably about 10 employees is when you really need to think about and sit down, have the team sit down. And the one exception is that during interviews, even if you're only the first 3 to 5 people, those 3 to 5 people are going to shape the culture of your entire business. So you do want to, in the very, very beginning, have screening of applicants and just ask questions. What do you think about the morality of quantum computing? What does a responsible quantum computer mean to you? Questions like that, where there's no real right or wrong answer. But then at 10 people, you should begin organizational planning. And you should begin to think, are there people that we will not sell our technology to? Are there, and this could change over time. Like, let's say we're not, let's say a company might say we won't sell defense technology, and then World War III happens, and then maybe they change their mind. But really, you around 10 people, you have to have a plan in place for hopefully devoting resources. So, for example, we devote a lot of resources and time in going into communities beyond quantum computing. So engaging with biologists, with the folks in the political world. So we were just down in DC speaking with senators on quantum computing. Our state governments in the US, global governments, and counties across the world. Because this is as global a technology as I have ever seen. And it is sort of decentralized, and I think that is what makes it difficult. But my advice would be at 10 people to begin your plan, and to have your plan include talking to the outside world. And I think that's the biggest part you can do in your plan, is making more people aware of what quantum computing can do. And then once you do that, you have to think about your implementation. And I don't want to, talk too much here, so I'll stop with this. Let's give an example of medicine and say, okay, we're going to make our business essentially 80% pure capitalist, within the means of companies that we believe will do good for the world, to some extent, or at least not harm. And 20% of our business will use research credits that we will give away for free to up and coming researchers at universities who otherwise would not have the ability to pay for our computers. So those are two examples, I would say.
I think that's Augusto. It's a very complex topic, I think, because the curiosity, the drive for progress is always seems to be the push, and then we try to regulate and cope with these topics in the aftermath. So I think the anticipation of the consequences and make them aware, everyone aware of the not on a knowledge level, but on a deeper understanding. I think that's the big task, and it's an educational initiative. And I think conversation, people are nodding and saying, this is, yes, I understand it. But to get to that level of understanding, that's a big challenge. And I'm very curious to that's why I wanted to ask, what are tangible, concrete things to take on. But I want to get to I want to get to your platform, to EeroQ. I want to building something unusual, I would say. It's, if I get it right, a quantum computer made of electrons that are floating above some kind of superfluid helium. It sounds to me poetic, even metaphysical. So first of all, can you just explain to me what EeroQ is, how it came to be, and give us a little bit of insight on what you're doing?
Well, first I can show you one of our chips. So, because it's always fun to see in real life and then go backwards from there. So these are one of our, so that's a PCB, of course, but the chip itself is a fully CMOS compatible chip that we had built by a foundry in Minnesota. Yes, I did get security clearance to show this. So in case anyone's wondering, what is he doing? Giving away all of our secrets. So this chip can hold about 2,432 electrons that we're able to control in an ensemble. And we can get that down to about packets of single electrons. And this is really was a standout, getting the Wonder Lake chip, as we call it, down to control of, we've been able to trap single electrons for many, many, many years. But being able to have, with this paper we just put out, being able to control them at 1 Kelvin was it was not a quantum. That was not one of our quantum chips, but it was at 1K, but everything still worked, and we were able to perform all of the regular operations on it. So it's going to take a while to go, but it's we got into PRX, and they seem to think that it could work. So we're very excited about not high temperature or room temperature quantum computing, but higher temperature computing. So how did it get started, you asked?
Also, this curiosity, what is that makes electrons on helium so special? Is that something that because this is something I'm not deeply into. I didn't want to read. I want to get your take on it. So is there something that makes that approach very special? What is that?
Oh yes. If there's that classic child story of the tortoise and the hare, and we are we are coming up from behind in the race. So this was actually theoretically proposed in a paper in Science in 1999 by Bell Labs and Michigan State University. And then our co-founder, Steve Lyon, who's a professor at Princeton, in a 2006, I believe it was Physical Review Applied, or PRA. I believe it was PRA. He made a spin on it, no pun intended, where we used the spin of the electron. And if you look at the history of technology, as I know you do, very, very, very rarely does the end result or end winning device, if you were to say, become the one that is actually used on a day-to-day basis and is the so-called winner. And the other element is that generally it's going to be something monolithic. It's going to be something where you can put everything on a single chip. So yes, we do need cryostats. So does lead us to having that, and those are getting smaller. But that's it. You can fit up to 1 million qubits on roughly the size of the chip that I just showed you. So I'll just give 2 killer examples, and then of course we can break it down a little bit more than that. But what makes it really unique is, number one, as I mentioned, the size, because we are able to expertly work with and manipulate single electrons. And we have been putting up a lot of work, and with more work to come on the archive about this. But we're able to work with single electrons. So what that means, naturally, given the size of electrons, we are able to fit many, many more qubits on a single chip. And this makes us very capital efficient, because we do not, and also easier for the customers, especially those that want on-premise systems, because we don't need to interconnect anything. Maybe after 10 million qubits, but once we get there, that'll be a whole different world that we're living in.
Yeah, obviously, but when you say maybe, do you see some limits, some barriers, either engineering or how from a physicist standpoint that you are facing down the road?
Yeah, so we've been in, as you mentioned at the beginning, we've been at this for a while. So yes, I've been in this for a decade, but if you combine the expertise of our team, who has been looking only at electrons and helium for quantum computing, not just electrons and helium broadly, just used for quantum computing, that's over 100+ years of experience. In addition to a stealth period, in addition to an IP moat. So we have taken great pains to make this a highly defensible product. And there just aren't that many people in the world doing it. So the reason that we have such confidence in it, as I mentioned, I do some of my own angel investing, and if someone were to come up with me with the pitch I just gave you 10 years ago, I would say you're crazy, because you don't know all the things that can go wrong. But having been doing it for 10 years now, in the first 5 years, we were basically bootstrapped with our own money and angel investors. And then we raised our first institutional round in 2022 from a venture capitalist, B Capital Group. They're the strategic partner of the Boston Consulting Group. That's when we felt that we really had everything, all of our ducks in a row, where we felt we had the IP, we had the line of sight on all of our hires, which we thought would take 6 months, and it only took 1 month. because Chicago, believe it or not, is I think will be the quantum hub of the United States. Even Silicon
Really?
Valley doesn't
That's
want
interesting.
it is. It is. I was.
Because I've been looking at Boulder and I see obviously
Yes.
where the money is, some states, right? So, but I've seen there are initiatives in Chicago, but I didn't, I didn't see that clear statement. That would be very interesting. It would be good for Chicago to have a core industry to come back to, and that would be a very, very exciting outlook for Chicago, having gone through that, down cycle of the automotive industry. So I would cheer for that. That would be a good promising outlook.
Well, thank you. Let's get it done. We're a part of getting that done. But
So
yeah,
come back to your journey,
yeah.
because I deliberately did not read deep into your work because I stumbled upon the approach, and I was like, I probably ran across your DLD in Munich in your travel to sort of conferences, and I've seen it, but I thought about this is an actual promising approach to a scalable quantum chip, and basically I was just curious, what is it that makes you so unique? What is a different approach that you take? And also, right, to that extent, if you look at the scalability of some of your competitors and players in the field, having raised, billions now to scale the companies, and you have been, I mean, every time you're a veteran in building, and some of these companies are much younger. So what is your outlook on the scalability? When are you going to, open up for larger investments, and what is the outlook for EeroQ in this very, very capital driven market, I would say?
It is the capital driven market, that's for sure. And I want one thing I would say is that this is not my first startup, so I've learned firsthand what can happen when you take venture capital too early. So, for example, when my co-founder Johannes he learned all about quantum computing at Caltech, which was his postdoc. And then his aha moment was putting together this paper from 1999 with his knowledge of electrons and helium. And then he became a professor, and I asked him what he wanted to do. And he said, well, electrons and helium are the dark horse. They are ranked, number 7, out of everyone knows the 6 major modalities. And then we have electrons and helium, which is everyone mostly will agree with you if you ask physicists. Yes, it makes sense. It's not some type of craziness, but it's going to be very hard. And, I would like to see the proof when it's there. And that's why we're very proud of all of our achievements along the last 10 years, because we have de-risked it very strategically, one by one, by doing all of the hardest parts first. So, creating the largest scaling layer using CMOS was critical, because if you do a quick logic exercise and say, okay, there's 7 ways to build a quantum computer, all of the familiar ones essentially, and then add us, only 2 of those are fully CMOS compatible, and that's us and silicon spin qubits. And what we do, if you want to imagine it, is the issue with silicon spin qubits. And again, we stay very close to that community. We were a sponsor of the Silicon Spin Workshop this year, so we have no hate in our heart for silicon spins. It's a great method because they also can get many qubits in a small area. However, our improvement is adding this thin layer of liquid helium right over the stamped CMOS chip. And so, you can fabricate, essentially, people colloquially, use stamp, but essentially what we're doing is we're taping out the chip. And then the foundry does the fabrication. And that's how we're able to credibly make the case that we can go from 1 qubit to 1,000,000 qubits on the order of 4 years to 5 years, as opposed to the 20 or 30 years that it has taken a number of other modalities. And it really lies in the CMOS and in that layer of helium protecting us from the impurities that the silicon spin qubits face, because silicon is an inherently imperfect material. So we just take the electrons out of the silicon, and then they float about 10 nanometers above the liquid helium at around 10 millikelvin. But again, we're looking to get that number higher over time. And that's your entire quantum computer is just on one chip. So to recap the main advantages, everything is just on one chip. So that saves us hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion, on capital expenditures, because we don't need to install 50 fridges. We only need 4 or 5. And that also helps us with CapEx, and if someone wants an on-prem system with delivery, because we just deliver a chip and they plug it into their cryostat. And of course, we would provide support when needed. But that is also very simple, because you just need one, this monolithic architecture. So it's that. And then, so that's the size is number one. The scalability is number two, because CMOS took $1 trillion and about 40 something years to get us to where we are today. So in our view, if you're not able to use CMOS to scale your quantum computer, nothing is impossible in this world, but that is very hard. So we said, let's go the easy way, because building a quantum computer is hard enough. So if there is any shortcut that we can take, we will take it. And that will help us get us there faster.
I'm listening to you, and it's so fascinating to compare that to the other quantum players and how they are moving towards commercialization, and the scalability seems to be a very promising path that you're on. Can you talk a little bit about, because many have chosen the software layers, there is a lot of talk about sensing and the whole essence of various use cases that are related to quantum. What is the commercial path for you guys now, moving from the state that you are on right now, and what are the commercial aspects that will help you scale, obviously on the ethical, responsible journey that you're on?
So one of the things that I learned from my first startup, which ultimately failed, is that persistence is everything, but also that focus is everything. And we were trying to do too many things at once. And when Johannes came to me and said there's a better way to build a quantum computer, and I thought about it more, I did not have the technical ability to do the due diligence on his claim it was the best way to build a quantum computer. Now I kind of do, and yeah, it is the best way to build a quantum computer. But it took me 10 years, and I always joke that I kind of cheated.
But everyone else would say that as well, though. And I'm looking for the one person that can neglect the other promising paths.
Yeah, well, and we, one of the things that we're very proud of is that we want the success of everyone in the field. And it was kind of the saddest moment in the field for me was I used to run a Telegram group called Club Qubit, and this was in maybe 2019, 2020, again, also COVID era. And we had about 40 high-level people in the quantum industry in this group. And then by 2022, it was essentially dead, because literally people in the group had fired other people in the group. So it was getting incredibly awkward. and everyone was getting more competitive. And so, one company would put out a claim, and then the other person would say, that's total BS, or they would DM me and say, hey, Nick, that's BS. Can you take it down? And it was, yeah. So we moved from this in the initial phases in the, 2015, 16, 17, and 2015 slightly predates me, but I was the very beginning of 2016 is when I really got into this. So coming up on my decade anniversary, and it really has, on the positive, it has changed because of all the snowball progress I mentioned. But on the negative side, people have certainly become much, much more competitive with each other. And there is no longer that sense that we're all in it together. And I think that's a little silly, because quantum computing is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, I think, over time. And we've already had $1 billion startup acquisition, regardless of the stock cash split. I mean, it's already happened. And that was just the start. And I know Chris was just on your show. So
I know, yeah, no, it's really, we had a great talk, and I think what they're doing is amazing for the industry as well, and also the government's getting involved. So I think also I agree with you. It's just the beginning. It's just the start of a transition to commercialization, and also with the year of quantum and everything that happened, you have commercial players on the marketing side. So I think that's very, very exciting, and I cheer on all the outliers in the sense of a new approach, and also to get it on a chip that is also usable, even if it's not room temperature, but taking those approaches, I think it's very, very interesting. And I was very curious to get your take on this.
Yeah, our most controversial take is that you have to are going to, in the end, to be on the top tier of quantum computing, to scale over 1 million or so qubits, physical qubits. You're going to need to be compatible with CMOS, but that doesn't mean that there will be winners that are not. So neutral atoms, for example, they're my second closest to my heart. I love neutral atoms. I think it's a beautiful platform, and I think we're going to have a very healthy, but what I want it to be is a healthy competition, where and I am friends with many people in the neutral atom community. So the goal is to maintain as many friendships as possible, and understanding that, hey, we don't all have to fight here over one small piece of pie. There is a very large, there's a very large piece of pie that we will have to fight over.
Yeah, at least if the pie gets bigger, we're all going to profit. So that you're all in this together. Have you looked at NV centers and the approach to diamonds? Have you listened to the episode that I did on Saxon Q just recently? Is that something
I know about that, but I've not heard the recent one. No.
All right. Okay. No, there was an episode. You should check that out. Yeah, with Marius Grundmann. He's the founder of a company called Saxon Q, and they have moved beyond the sensing and also working on a room temperature chip, a scalable quantum computer based on the NV center approach. It's very interesting. I would like to get your take on it once you've looked into that, because your openness towards various fields, you should be curious about what they're doing as well.
Yeah. So we actually in speaking, we can speak to that very authentically. So my co-founder Johannes, he's a full-time employee of EeroQ, but he also maintains a lab at Michigan State University, and they are working on NV centers. So he's an expert in NV centers as well. And they've also done some work with superconducting. So we have this shared belief that we really believe in, that having a hybrid approach or something like that in the future is going to be the way to go for quantum computing. It won't just be one single winner and then that's the end of the road.
Yeah, I think also the whole relationship to GPUs and CPUs,
Yes.
that whole essence of that whole ecosystem is growing together, and I think I'm totally with you on that. But let me ask you, like, trying to tie this back to your interest where you open the philosophical pondering. If we get quantum right, ethically, socially,
Yep.
spiritually, I don't know, what does this world look like? What is a civilization or a future, potential future that you want to see or foresee? If you could have a magic wand and to create a quantum economy or a potential future, how does that look like?
I'm going to be very careful here because the first thing I say for all of those who are listening who are physicists or in the field, I am referring when I speak now to a future large-scale error-corrected quantum computer, which I think could be not that far along, 10 years maybe, maybe less even. But I'm not talking about a NISQ era computer. So I will answer your question in the exciting way, which is once we have a truly powerful quantum computer, what will we be able to do with it? Because these are things that I know some companies use to sell as applications today when we're not there yet. But there's really two that get me out of the bed in the morning and make me want to have an impact on the world. And those two are the medicine and climate change. I'm a member of a nonprofit called Q for Climate. And we've uploaded we have a white paper draft. We're working on a new conference now. I believe the next one will be in Sao Paulo. And there's been a number of other initiatives around quantum and climate, especially by McKinsey. Worley has done some work around that. I mean, what hasn't Worley done work around? It's everything. It's amazing.
He's all over the place, isn't he?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think the potential for quantum computers to not only, again, solve problems by finding better catalysts for fertilizers that knocks off 1% of our global energy production. But also, if we can get quantum computers to begin to replace GPUs, that is where things start to get really interesting. And that requires incredibly complex computer engineering, the intersection of, the types of problems that you would be dealing with. And it won't work for all cases. But my optimistic view, to be optimistic towards the end here, is that we're going to be able to, in the future, instead of having a huge data center, even without quantum chips that can create new training models or can advance the state of the art of artificial intelligence, AGI, any of that, even before they can do that, I believe they will power up a number of their applications. And there has been academic work done on this, with a smaller number of chips. So our entire operation, including the refrigerator, the cryostat from Finland, costs only $360 a month to operate. That's it.
That's a starting point.
Exactly. So imagine if we could have 4 of those, that could replace a data center that is costing, I don't want to give an exact number, but let's say $25 million a year, potentially.
I see where you're going with this, and I don't want to interrupt that rest of more, because I mean you're looking scalability, right? Computation. So I would like just to take that back to the outlook of what are we doing, right? We were gifted two opposable thumbs to create tools to improve reality. Now, if you look at it, you mentioned AGI. So I assume however we want to define AGI, you think there is potentiality for more compute and better ways to set up the structures of AI with some world models or whatever, that we can reach AGI. When you look at Ray Kurzweil, you have the argument of 2029, and you have some kind of technological singularity. It might, to me, sound more plausible than that the speed will then increase once we have, AI or computers that could come up with creation and innovation themselves, and it can put more compute to the magnitude of a quantum computer. So a technological singularity seems much, much, much faster than the outlook of, let's say, some 16 years. And I would be just curious about your more broader, I wouldn't say science fiction reality, because I always come back to science philosophy as sci-fi with a PHI, but to ponder a little bit, are we now building tools? Throughout history, technology has been tools, right? Or are we, literally rewriting reality? Are there things that you think about at night that makes you go, this is different? This is an impact to the extent that we are not now just serving ourselves to optimize, but we are handing over authorities to technology, and thereby, reaching some state that we can even rewrite the way we perceive what we have called reality. Nick, I would be curious about your philosophical openness to take that journey for
Yes, I think we are rewriting what we perceive to be reality. I think that is you of the options you gave and of the things that I believe. We are entering an entire new era that I don't think most people appreciate the speed at which things are happening. And if there's one thing that I would like to do as a legacy, it would be to educate as many people as possible on the speed at which technology is changing reality, and is in many ways altering reality. I mean, this might sound like a silly example, but I mean, the Meta Ray-Bans. I mean, we're in a world now where it is only going to be more and more difficult to distinguish what is real and what is not real. And then we have to define what real even means anymore. Because one could argue that something that you see on a screen is perfectly real, just because it's not something tangible, it's not something that you can touch. They would say, oh, there's no way that can be real. But, I could easily make the counterpoint that this is a creation of art that someone has put on our podcast here. And this is indeed a part of the world. And as quantum computing, and what we're doing now is we're simply talking about a podcast online. And once quantum computing and then AGI get heated up more fully, we're talking about a completely different world. So I would like to inform, and because you talked earlier about ignorance and whatnot, I would like to eliminate as much ignorance around quantum computing as possible, so that people at the very least know what they're getting into, that the world is forcing them to get into.
Yeah. I think, Nick, that's a beautiful way to round off our hour of conversation here. I think we went philosophical on the ethical path, and ended up in the same place we started off on. And we got to get a look. I got to understand better what you're working on, and where can people read up on your latest work? Where can they read the papers and dig into your values and your things that you publish on? And where can you read more about your entrepreneurial journey?
Absolutely. So EeroQ.com, it's EeroQ.com. Fun fact, that's roughly Eric in Finnish. And my co-founder is Finnish. And that was the name of his first son he had very shortly before that. And we were looking for a placeholder on our business plan. And we just put EeroQ as a placeholder. And then I designed the logo the next day myself in 20 minutes. And it's stuck for the next 10 years. It's very, very, very funny. But go to EeroQ.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So we'll be sure to promote this and your future episodes. And quantum Twitter used to be more of a thing than it is now, but I'm still very active on Twitter at Nick_Farina. So I'm easy to connect with. I like connecting with people, especially around the excitement around our technology. If nick@eeroq.com works, feel free to send a direct email. Of course, you can always email us on our website, but anyone listening here, just reach out to me directly.
Cool. Thank you so much for doing this, Nick. And I can follow you now and have a look at EeroQ and your growth path and the things that you're up to. I'm excited about the future, having people also that look at the responsible path of quantum computing. And we share very many views on the speed of things. And again, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Anders. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.